There we go. Perfect. Hello, hello, and welcome to the Talking Stick Show. So I'm joined by Anna Louise Haigh. Hello, hello.
Hello. Lovely to see you. Thanks for inviting me down.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. So how's things with you?
Absolutely fabulous, as always. You know, keeping the positive light going and doing the best we can to keep inspiring people.
And how's lockdown been for you?
Oh, there's been ups and downs, as with everybody, I think. No, I don't think anybody's got superhuman strength to stay positive all the time, but it's been a really incubating time, I think is what I'd say. It's been a time when I can really focus on connecting with my reach, my audience online and through Facebook, and I love that. And yeah, I'm missing seeing my private clients, but you know, we'll get back to that at some point. But I've written another book. It's just about to go to be published, which was born out of my Facebook group rebranding back in December. So it changed from Living in Your Wow to the Soul Whisperer Sisterhood. And that's gathered such great momentum, and it's a great community, and we have a laugh, we grow. And our manifesto, which I launched in January, is now being turned into a book. So it's all good to keep me busy.
Beautiful. And we'll go more into the book later on in the show. So let's kind of go back a little bit and start from the first lockdown. So this is the third time now we've gone into lockdown. So just from your perspective, how has it been for you? So let's go backwards. Was it last year? I think it was last spring, wasn't it? We're in the first lockdown.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I do feel that it'd be great on this show to kind of talk about self-love and having a bit more of the tools to be able to cope with what's going on. Because when I was messaging you and we talked about how sometimes the reality can change, and it's about kind of changing with it and how to change with that. So let's talk a little bit about the lockdown situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, the first lockdown seemed like a holiday. And the weather was so good, you know, uncharacteristically good for the few weeks. And I know that a lot of people sort of saw it as an opportunity to catch up on a few things, do quite a lot of decluttering, and kind of get their external world sorted. And I saw a lot of optimism. I saw a lot of talk about this being a great awakening, and I still feel that's true. And as the summer rolled on, I think people kind of got to the grips of, they dealt with everything on the outside of their lives, and they'd done their decorating, their gardens were looking better than ever, you know, decluttering had happened, and life was feeling a bit more free and easy. And I think from a spiritual perspective, what I see has happened is that we've gone through that initial feeling of, woohoo, we've got a paid holiday and it's all great, lovely, wonderful. And then it's like we come down the other side of it and it's okay, so how long is this going to last? Is this reality for now? And so from a metaphorical perspective, I see it that we went from dealing with our outside world and making our outside world lovely, wonderful, the way we want it to be, catch up on our jobs. And then with each lockdown, we come closer and closer into ourselves. So the second lockdown was restrictions about who you could see. Christmas, of course, was a blowout in all the wrong ways. And so we're coming closer into ourselves now with the third lockdown. We've got our decluttering done. There's nowhere to take your stuff anyway if you want to declutter. You know, you may have decorated everything that needs decorating and you can't decorate anymore. You can't go and visit your family and all the rest of the restrictions we know that are in place. The only one constant is that you can get outside to exercise and appreciate nature more, which is really, really a heart-stinging moment, although you can't travel so far and you've got to obey the rules, etc. But what I see metaphorically is that as each lockdown has happened, we've been given the opportunity to come closer and closer into looking at who we are, what our lives are about, how we can make our life more all-rounded, and that includes self-love. Because I don't know about you, Dale, but I am running at the launch pad for getting out of these lockdowns and getting to the place where we can do what we need to do and have a bit of revenge time, you know, when it's right, when it's safe, when we're healthy, when we're all fine, get out and make out for lost time. But wouldn't it be wonderful to bring your best self to that new party, that, you know, the connection you've got with people when you meet back up with your friends, when maybe you meet Facebook friends? Wouldn't it be wonderful to bring your best self forward? And the only way to really truly do that is to clear out your clutter gremlins from your heart and your soul and get into the groove of self-love and let that love in. That to me is how I see the lockdowns going. I know there's a colossal amount of other stuff that's talked about on the internet with all of this. And, you know, there's always going to be that kind of thing. But the only way you can get through this is by dealing with yourself and what you value. And that's
Beautiful.
why, to me, the foundation is self-love. I've just noticed it's 11:11. How perfect is that?
There we go. The universe saying hello.
Yeah,
Everything's
exactly.
aligning.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons as well, I'd like to say before we fully go into everything, was to bring you on. You've got a very unique perspective, and even listening to your perspective, then it's so refreshing to hear that perspective, the lockdown, and how it kind of breaks everything down for us. We're left with the external stuff, then now we are left internally, and there's maybe something beyond our measurement going on to help us as a collective reflect and awaken. And it's interesting that you say, because what I really appreciate about your work is that it's all about you and helping people do inner work, and that's one of the most important things. And there's so many things spiritually going on, so many things you can do, but for me, what you're doing is very important as part of the awakening, part of the collective, because you're actually dealing with people's emotions and helping them figure out themselves. Because sometimes you think spirituality is all about love and dove, and it's quite easy. I do this meditation one and I'm fine, I do this, but you're left with this work, and this is what we wanted to talk about today. So looking into self-love, so if we start into self-love, what is love? Because I feel that's an important thing to start with, then to kind of move on from that. For those people who are, what is love? It's a great question. I love it.
Oh, how long have you got? I mean, love is so many things, isn't it? And it is an intensely, always has to be an intensely personal perspective. And I find I don't want to make it sound simplistic, but if we talk about love in itself as a concept, I find, you know, there can be external love and there can be internal love. So you might love your car, your boots, your camera, your phone, but that can't love you back. So that to me is external love. It's non-reciprocated, whereas internal love is like an infinite loop that rolls around inside you. Love to me is about, total love is about full acceptance and being the best person you can be in any given moment, so that when you show up, you may not be sparkly perfect, but you are conscious and aware that you are always aiming to be that honorable, truthful person. And love, really, I find that love is what makes the world go round. The love of something, somebody, an ideal, a value, a quality. And without that, it is, you know, you could call love a motivator. You could call it a quality, a value, a measurement. You could call it everything and nothing. And what I mean by that is that nothing is anything unless there is love involved.
Beautiful. And what about a little bit about so say when you're born and you're growing up, and what does the world kind of express to you? Because I feel there's a separation between love and false love, false light, kind of, in a sense. So can you give a bit of an explanation on what's the contrast between true love and the false love?
Yeah. So if I take it from kind of our age group or our generation, if you like, thinking from the 1960s up to now, that kind of thing, and obviously everybody in between, one of the things I find is that because we've come through this era, is that we're never taught to love ourselves. We're taught to be good, and good equates to being lovable. And that's very false, I find. We're taught that love can be withdrawn, if we're not achieving goals, if we're not meeting certain standards. And so false love to me is one that is used as manipulation, or is used as motivation in any circumstance. And what happens, I find, is that from a young age, without realizing it, those around you may infer that you are lovable if you are good. You are lovable if you eat all your food off your plate. You're lovable if you achieve certain qualifications, or you do this, you do that to please somebody else. And because of that, because as the child interprets that as meaning you must do this, otherwise you're not lovable, it's very fragile. And so as a child, if that perception has been created, which for most people it is because of the way we're brought up, then that fragility and that vulnerability is easily shattered. And so we as individuals start to create our own stories about how lovable we are, about what we deserve, about our own limitations, and so on. So that kind of false love, which can be withdrawn, is one which is unhealthy. And as in terms of self-love, I don't think in our era we're ever taught to self-love. Maybe in some younger generations now, maybe, you know, in different age groups, they are more so taught to self-love. But the people I work with, who are generally 40 and above, you know, it's all a case of even being able to think about self-loving.
Yeah.
Because there's such a weirdness around it in their minds because of where they've come from. So self-love to me is a whole big topic, which obviously we're going to talk about more today.
Beautiful. And that's it. There's Valentine's around the corner in a few days' time. And I feel one of the greatest things you can do this Valentine's is get yourself a gift, and in a gift of something what can actually invest in yourself to make you actually feel better, instead of, like you say, the external all the time and trying to change the external without going within.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the best gifts you could give yourself this Valentine's is to buy yourself a lovely journal. Ideally from a local shop, if you can possibly get there to support your local shop. But if you can't, and give yourself the gift of reflection. And that gift would be one that says, I allow myself to love myself because, and then list half a dozen reasons why you are lovable. That would be the best gift to yourself this Valentine's, because it's enduring, it's truthful, it's keepable, and you can build upon it. It opens up your heart.
Beautiful. And let's look into a little bit about why people give up on themselves, because I do feel that, as well as self-love, and how does that kind of, the people who give up on themselves, how does that connect to their inner child? What's the connection between the inner child and giving up on themselves?
The connection to me is that the myth stories, not the mystery, the myth stories that one creates within oneself based on often innocent comments made by others when we're a child, diminishes our view of ourselves. We may compare ourselves to others, to a sibling or to a friend. Kids today are so pressurized to get good grades, and in that there's grading and competition and worthiness. And so from an inner child perspective, it's very easy for the impression for that child, that person, to gain a perspective that they are not worthy of anything better than they're receiving, that they are never going to be able to move beyond this loop, because everything a young person knows, which is what forms the inner child that we carry with us, everything we gain comes from the influence and imprints of the elders around us. And those elders around us may not have dealt with their stuff along the way. So unfortunately, they're recycling different versions of their own unhealed stuff while trying to do their best. So they may be fighting within themselves. So it's nobody's fault. It's just a case of, the wounded healer, if you're talking about therapists, the wounded healer often is of greatest service to others because they understand so many things, but they're not necessarily healing along their own journey. So from parenting perspective, if there's limiting mindsets, misbeliefs, low self-esteem, low self-worth, issues and episodes that haven't been healed, then they may well flow out into their conversation, into their actions, into their beliefs and values that are put upon the younger child, that put upon any children. And then that cements the inner child that we carry forward with us, which ends up being somebody who needs at a different age to learn how to love themselves. And so it's often about allowability, knowing there is a different way. You're allowed to think differently about yourself. You're allowed to be lovable. And a lot of my work I do with people is helping them learn how to do that and cultivate that.
Beautiful. And it reminds me of when I've gone through my challenges and all of the stuff external which I picked up from my family, where it's kind of like when you grow up, you're a sponge, aren't you, to everything, and you sponge everything up, and it's kind of all attached to you. And like, even the way I teach speak to my children, sometimes I have to say, I have to really look at what I'm doing as a whole, as a parent. And even as it's so interesting you say that the people who are out there who want to become teachers, healers, that it's so vitally important that you do the inner work, because as when you're dealing with clients, like, is there's a require of responsibility and there's a cry of energy to have. And if you're not dealing with your own stuff, but you're helping other people all the time, and this kind of connects to not just teachers, this connects to people. I know a lot of people, myself included in the past, who like to just help other people. And look, let's talk a little bit about that, the people who help everyone else but themselves. And that's a huge thing on the world at the moment, that the validation comes from the savior and helping them to feel that happiness is.
There's so many people who avoid doing their own inner work, or allowing themselves to dive into their own self lovability by constantly being the habitual giver, the habitual savior, the rescuer, the carer, the sacrificial lamb. And it's almost as though any one of those archetypes or mindsets has actually become their coat of honor, and that they are so good at doing it. And yes, it's beautiful that they do. However, you can't draw from an empty pot. And the thing is that when people are habitual sharers, givers, carers, they're not actually, although their intentions are really good, in my mind, they're not actually giving a significant value, because they're drawing from a place that's already empty. And certainly if it's not quite empty, it's definitely not being refilled, because the art of self-love actually allows for replenishment, self-replenishment. Like you were saying, buy yourself a lovely gift. My version of that is get yourself a journal and start to look inwards. Unfortunately, when we are being brought up, we are taught that to put everybody else first is the right thing to do. To help everybody and be a willing, generous, kind, caring person is the right thing to do. And I'm not saying it's not. What I'm saying is there's a balance. There has to be both. And ultimately, what I find is that, particularly now, during the lockdowns and stuff, people are frustrated that they can't get to see their family, but they're doing what they can. They're making meals or doing more time on Skype and Zoom and all that stuff. We are working with ourselves a lot more differently. Time is managed differently. And that may or may not open up pockets of time for self-care, just to go and read a book, to go for a walk on your own, to take the digital out of it, to not be in anybody else's demand, is really vitally important. And that's an act of self-love. Just literally to bubble yourself off in your own bubble. I hate the fact that the government has used the word bubble for what we're meant to be doing, or what we were meant to be doing, because I think a bubble is a really self-honoring place. And while a social bubble is nice and it's really valuable, we need to self-bubble. We need that. And when people are too rampantly giving all the time, the only thing that can happen is their energy depletes. And then they don't have any energy to look at saying to themselves, oh, I could just go for a walk, or I just want to sit down and read a book, because they haven't just got the energy to do it. All they will do is sleep.
That's
And
it.
that's another avoidance strategy.
And I've had clients and people, friends in the past who've spoken to me, and it's so funny because there's a lot of beliefs out there, as if you go see, say, someone like yourself or myself or someone else, and that you have one session and you're all done straight after that session. And this is such a bit, this is quite a big thing at the moment, and it's in my life, it's been going over and over, and I've had these teachers come in and show me all these different things. Teachers, as I mean the my students or my clients, and it's so funny because the amount of effort you give for them to make them realize about, you have to be working on yourself, you have to be doing the self-work, and because they don't get that quick fix and me be able to fix them there and then, they're talking about helping other people, helping me as well after, and the whole, it's so interesting how we've gone so backwards. And like you say, self-love is really hard to find within our oral teachers or the people at the media, so on and so forth.
Oh yeah. I mean, from an external perspective, the media and so on, it is very, although you might, go on to Google and ask a few googly kind of questions, our culture is not geared to teach us to be self-loving. And it's about obliging ourselves to show up for other people, however that is. And, the explosion of therapists, healers, spiritual teachers, and so on that's happened over the last 40 odd years is testament to how much people need the kind of work we do. And what I do find is that for people who are unable to connect in with their own sense of self-love and self-value, who are kind of floating, always looking for the opportunity to help others and so on, one of the downsides of that is that they leave themselves open to be manipulated, or they leave themselves open to narcissistic relationships, and they won't realize it because they've got this sense of eternal hope, which they can fix somebody, they can heal somebody, if they care enough, somebody will be good enough and will be nice enough to them. And so, self-love, whether you call it self-esteem, self-honoring, whatever you want to call it, is a life skill as far as I'm concerned, because it will help you set up for better relationships, healthier physical, healthier well-being, mental stability, and that gives you strength and ability to cope with what's happening in the world, what's happening in your world, what's happening in the world around you. And so I truly believe self-love is a life skill, just like learning how to drive, learning how to cook, and so on. It's an essential.
And that's it. When you look at the media, what are you seeing? You're seeing like kind of the military energy, the control energy, that you have to make money to be able to be successful. You have to make money to feel good. And that's what we're growing up with, the teachers as well as obviously there are positive things in the academic world for you to look into. But on the other side of things, when I was at school, I felt so alone, and because I was classed as dyslexic, I always had that where I wasn't good enough, and I never tried anymore because the teachers put me and said, oh, you need extra help, you're not going to do as well. And for me, I just grew up with seeing all these other people doing well, and I was just like, well, that's me, this is who I am. And you accept that role of then there's no self-love in it at all, and it's quite a sad thing in a sense to be able to feel that and go back to that feeling of when I was younger doing that. Maybe that's time for some more inner work on that front. Yep. So let's talk a little bit about schools and what do they teach us, both sides?
Well, I mean, going back, I'm dyslexic as well, and I remember the feelings of isolation, lack of not being enough, and just never being able to be good enough.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I would like to think that today schools have more awareness, certainly of children who perhaps need that extra bit of reassurance and encouragement, and even just a bit of time to understand where their needs are. I think in general, like in a total looking at schools and education, I'd like to think that the majority of schools nurture the person and the soul rather than the academic output. And I know there are schools that do that, that nurture the individual rather than conformity to a certain standard. However, for our current situation where you've got parents who are either having to homeschool, which is one option, one thing, or back in the day when both parents maybe went out to work, the kids went to school, etc. And then where is the nurturing coming in? Because the schools are pressurized to get results and get grades and get Ofsteded and all the rest of it. Home is busy, and there's a big disconnect there. And from a child's perspective, just as they're starting to develop in their younger years, age 5, 6, 7, just as they're starting to develop their personality, they're put into a conformed structure called education, where the individual is morphed into some like little product that perhaps loses its sense of self. And having said that, I'm sure we've all had that one special teacher who saw something in us and saw that you loved science or you loved art and made the difference. That one teacher that gave you the inspiration to feel good about yourself. And so I'm not casting a brush over all education in that way, in a negative way. What I'm saying is, for people who perhaps didn't fit in well at school, were misfits, dyslexic, whatever you might call it, I will call them now, they're probably free thinkers. And they challenge the norm. They ask why. They don't just blindly go into some form of sheepiness or sheepleness, that they do retain their individuality. And I think if you can leave your educational years with that sense of curiosity and free thinking ability, that you are not going to become a 9-to-5 sheep, then you've gained the best you can from education. And I think where we're at right now, because we're all having to look differently into our world and how we go about things, I'm hoping that wakes that up inside people more creativity, more sense of asking who you are. And when you start to ask those questions, you will eventually boil down to, who am I and how do I love myself? And it's part of the journey. It's part of the awakening that we're in. And I love the fact that we can talk about this, and it's here to be shared.
Beautiful. And there's a term which I've heard, COVID the virus, which just keeps on giving, in the sense of obviously there's a negative side of things, as in everything, what happens like that. But for me, I have to see COVID as a virus, what keeps on giving, in a sense of, if you look at it from the potentials of the world and how it's been, and how we've been so confined, controlled, we've been told what to do, and we've been kind of stuck in our jobs, we've been so busy in our jobs, we've forgotten about ourselves. And this virus for me holds, there's obviously the conspiracy theory about everything, but I know for a fact I've had family who've had this virus, and I've had one family member who've passed on from this virus. So I know it's a real, true virus. And for me, looking at it from a spiritual perspective, I do believe this has a big karmic retribution cycle, and one of its roles is to help people, like you say. And that was a great explanation, great perspective at the start, where you were talking about the first lockdown. It was easy because you were going out, like you say, doing your garden. The second one, it's like, it was a bit shorter, we could get on with it. Then the third one comes, and wow, everyone's angry, everyone's bitter, everyone's annoyed, and they're trying to show us the next thing to keep us occupied from going within.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is that I don't think anybody could deny that there is a virus out there, that there is something very serious to be considering. And it's important to keep your mind and eyes open as to other scenarios that you can use to draw upon to build yourself up and not disappear down rabbit holes. And when you go down a rabbit hole, your immunity goes right with you. So it's important to flip it, just completely flip it, and find each day, find a way to honor yourself. And when I've worked with people in the past, people have chided at, oh, well, everybody says I need to self-love myself, self-love. And they feel that they're giving up into some hippiedom or all the rest of it. It's a perception, it's perception. And, love is all you need. That is the biggest, best world mantra there could possibly be. And that's been with us for decades. But I tend to turn the word self-love into self-honoring. And the thing is that the big cultural thing that pounds in people's minds, and people have said it to me, and I know to some of my colleagues and my friends, when you are self-honoring, self-loving, others who don't get it, who are afraid to go down that journey, will call you selfish. Because ultimately, the ones who call you selfish are probably the ones who aren't going to get from you what you normally give. And they're just thinking, well, what am I going to do now? So who is the selfish person? It just makes me wonder. And so to me, whether you call it self-love, self-honoring, self-high esteem, established self-worth, it's all about that sense of accepting yourself as perfectly imperfect as you are, knowing you're a work in progress, and that it takes a while, and there are stepping stones, and there are people who can help, but always keep your discernment going. And like I say at the beginning of any book or anything I ever do, you don't have to believe a single word I say. In fact, challenge it. However, if it resonates, if it feels right for you, it must be right at some place in your heart and soul. And let's grow with that. And, I don't have all the answers. You don't, Dale. None of us do. We're all just exponents of one value, and that is that love is the fundamental driving force of all good.
That reminded me, I've mentioned this, I think it was on the first or second show, I had a Greek t-shirt, and it was in Greek writing. I didn't know what it said for ages, and I was wearing it. And someone that said, "Do you know what it says?" And said, "The only thing I know is I know nothing." And and I had this t-shirt for probably about a year, and someone said that to me. I was like, wow, that's incredible.
Perfect. Brilliant. I think you need to wear that maybe again.
Yeah, I'll have to.
In that same boat. We're all learning together, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant.
And so let's look at so say for on lockdown, I think one of the biggest problems for a lot of people is repetition and feeling stuck from doing the same things over and over again. And I've dealt with this. I've been working a lot on this. What would you recommend and advise for people who are feeling trapped, doing the same thing over and over again? How can they help themselves?
That's a brilliant question. So I know that there are certain restrictions. We can't jump in the car and go to the coast or have a party with our friends and things like that. So that would be a great circuit breaker. And it is like Groundhog Day, definitely. However, one of my best suggestions is look at, and maybe use your journal for this, look at what it is that you're repeating every day. How do you feel about that? And the big thing is to follow the feelings. So if you're feeling bored, isolated, lonely, fed up, whatever it might be, all very low vibrational emotions, then think about what the opposite is of those emotions. So if you're feeling bored, you need to feel inspired. If you're feeling lonely, you need to feel connected, and so on. And don't stop there. You see, what I find is that people identify a problem, but stop at that point. They treat it as though that's an absolute truth and can never change. So think about what your feelings are that are low vibrational, flip them into something higher vibrational, and then ask yourself, what can I do today to give myself that feeling? And it might be something simple. It might be getting out your photo albums or those random boxes of photos that haven't got any organization to them, and going through your photos and organizing them, or looking back on the memories. I know that could feel sad in some ways, but also if you allow yourself to feel positive and look for the positive, that's what you'll find. You need to put a different set of goggles on. And with finding the positive, being grateful for the little things. You know, I don't know about you, Dale. It's beautiful sunny here where I'm at. The air is crisp. You know, just to be able to stand on your doorstep and take a few nice deep breaths, soak up that gorgeous wintertime energy, feel refreshed, that is something to be uplifting. You know, it will uplift your spirit. So it's looking for the little things you can be grateful for. And I know a lot of people are feeling massively fed up and getting angry because of it. And the reality is that that kind of feeling is going to sink your immune system. And you just don't need that, you know? So if you can find a way to uplift yourself through gratitude, general appreciation, connecting with others, getting on the phone with others. You know, one of the things I've suggested to my other groups is that if you have an old set of notelets, like cards you might send, I've got a stack of cards I buy because I like them. Sit down with your address book and write 5 people a card and put it through, get it in the post to them. Because that way 5 people are going to get a lovely message from you, which is unexpected. You feel good, they feel good, boom, job done. Do something different. Take action.
Beautiful.
Take action.
And I love that word you use. I don't really hear many people use it, discernment. And that's a great word. Do you want to explain a bit what discernment means? Because I feel that's a great word to separate judgment and discernment. They're 2 different sides, and instead of being in judgment, what's the difference between discernment and judgment? That's a good question.
Thank you. Okay. So to me, being in judgment means that you make a finite decision about something, and often to sit in judgment of something or somebody means that you are assigning a certain value to that person or a tag to that person. And once you do that, in your eyes, they can never be different. So let's say there's a particular actor, you don't like any of the films that that actor's in. So every time you hear that actor's name, because you've decided that you don't like whatever it is they bring to the screen, immediately you've made a judgment, and they could go out and create the best film ever that actually turns the world on its head, and you won't be able to see it for what it is in that light because you're stuck back in a judgment. So a judgment stops growth. A judgment pigeonholes people. It limits yourself, and energetically it limits the other person. And remember, we are all receiving energy all the time, just like you're receiving your phone energy and all the rest of it. And so even though you might not know others that you've got a decision or a criticism or a judgment about, that energy is still going to them. And you know what? Life's tough enough. If we just try to send out that element of acceptance and love, then ultimately we'll all move up. Discernment, on the other hand, to me, is about, to me, judgment's an external thing. Okay, so you're judging others. Yes, you can judge yourself, but discernment to me is about being able to understand what fits with your values, the qualities that you want to resonate in the world, that you are able to accept others' opinions, but you are discerning, you are selective about what ones you use to grow yourself or diminish yourself. And so by using discernment when you're in the company of others, it gives you an opportunity of acceptance. You may not accept what others say, you don't have to take it on board in your heart, but you can give them the space to express themselves without you judging them. So to me, that's how discernment and judgment differ. It's about self-honoring. Again, discerning is about self-honoring. If somebody does something, you know, to me or for me or at me or whatever, that is with low intention, low vibrational intention, I have a choice about how I receive that. I can either be really wounded and sit for days with my head in my hands and wonder what the heck's going on, or I can choose to say, okay, well, I can learn from that. And also maybe that was where they're at, and maybe they're having a bad day and I was the person who showed up. for some reason and took the hit and let go of it. Discernment gives you choices, judgment doesn't.
That's it. And the conversations you sometimes have with people where they won't listen to what you have to say. They've already judged what you've had to say, and it doesn't matter what you say to them. They're still waiting to say what they want to say, so you can listen to that. And that's how I feel that one of the biggest things towards unity consciousness and towards the realms of self-love would be, that's a great word, is for people to learn about true discernment and separating the realities from judgment. And non-judgment, non-competition, non-hierarchical order is one of the three things I have in my life to visualize, to be able to, for me to experience more of my love. And that's one of the biggest things. Of competition as well. There's healthy competition, I understand that, with games, so on and so forth, but understanding that everyone has a role to play. You have your role to play, I have my role to play, and just allowing that to happen instead of trying to have everything about us and stuff like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the thing is, I'll come back to something I said earlier on. I think, a lot of us are brought up with the idea that we have to meet some elusive standard. We have to be perfect in some way in order to be lovable. And that simply isn't true. And I'm hoping that with generations that come up after us, that somehow those kind of misbeliefs get broken and get replaced with something more accepting and wholesome. And I think, in the kind of the people I work with primarily, like I say, 40 and above, we've come from parenting that is of a certain era in their time, certain standards, values, Victorian, whatever it might be. And so, we're living the legacy that they left us. But just because that's their legacy doesn't mean we have to live every moment of it. And we're allowed to create our own legacy, which will be born out of the love we leave behind.
Beautiful.
But most importantly, it's the love for ourselves that will nurture everything else.
Beautiful. And you talked about journaling as well, and that's something I really appreciate, and I do feel everyone should give it a go. What's the importance of journaling, and how does that connect to self-love as well?
Oh, great question. Journaling is different to diary keeping. So you don't have to do it every day. It's more of an inspirational, as the feeling strikes you, kind of thing. To me, journaling is about making yourself into taking your thoughts and making them into something real, because they get out of you from your head into a paper form. And from there, it can be a great reflective tool. It can be a great awareness tool. And often what I do is I just sit down, I put the date at the top of every page, no matter whether I'm turning pages and keeping writing or not, put the date at the top of every page. And I may ask myself a question, or something has prompted me to wonder about it. And while I don't disappear down rabbit holes of questioning everything, like, why did I feel so good on that walk today? That could be a topic, but is it important to me today? No, not especially, but other days it might be. And just really sitting in stillness, imagine yourself opening like a book from your heart center, pen in hand, paper in front of you. Journal about how you're feeling. Start off, today I am feeling, and just keep writing. And don't force it, don't filter it. But journaling is a brilliant tool to become reflective and to grow at the same time. And I really encourage everybody to work on journaling, because it's private, it's sacred space, it's truthful. And in gaining a regular journaling practice, it becomes the story of your growth. And it will help you to move through the challenges of life, because there'll be strength in there. There'll be wisdom, there'll be awareness. And in a lot of cases, you can work out some of your gremlins as well. So you can write it out. Yeah.
And I've looked back at a few of my journals from a few years back, and it's great to see that transition point to, I do feel that one of the most important things on my own personal journey is now and then to have victory in what I'm doing. And looking back at my journal gives me self-victory and inspiration that 4 years ago I was doing this, or 2 years ago I was doing this, and I'm looking at and reading the person I was back then, and I'm like, wow, I have, because I've been doing these tools of self-love, doing a lot of work on myself, I've been having growth. I've still got loads of work to do, an infinite amount of work to do on myself still, but looking back at that past self and actually thinking, oh wow, I've come a long way. And it's like the proof in the pudding, isn't it, situation that that's your data for you to navigate and to grow from.
Yeah, it's like creating a blueprint. I mean, I remember, I still have it. I remember when I was 21, miserably unhappy in the job I was in, having left college. And I sat down one weekend and I had a spiral notebook, and I just simply sat there. And my first question was, what would make me happier? And by the end of it, I had written the full blueprint and business plan for what would become my self-employment. It was about 6 years later. I'd completely forgotten I'd done all that, but I just emptied everything out of my head, even names of my business, what training I needed. And at the end of the weekend, I thought, well, that was a nice distraction, put the book away, didn't find it till I'd moved country, got married, got divorced, and all the rest of it, and found it when I was moving. And I opened it up and it's like, oh my God, there is what I'm doing now. And I didn't even realize I had manifested it. So I find journaling can be a beautiful dream space, but it's also can be a manifesting space depending on what your focus is. And your focus can change every day. So yeah, I really, really advocate journaling. Every student I work with is given a journal or is told to get a journal.
Beautiful. And I think the last topic we should speak about today before we go into what's going on and what's coming up for you and the book would be to talk. I think this is a very important topic at the moment I've had in my past is overthinking. And I think overthinking is one of the biggest walls on self-love and self-mastery and self-care. So let's talk a little bit about the overthinking, because a lot of people have the issue of overthinking.
Yeah, they do. I call that a legitimizer. And the reason why I call it that is because academia, or thinking academically, or thinking full stop, is valued in society much higher than feeling. And you can measure thinking and the results of thinking, whereas you can't necessarily grade or quantify feeling from an external perspective. And I find that when people get stuck in overthinking, they legitimize their stuckness. They legitimize the reasons why they're not exploring self-love by staying in the loop of yes, but why? Yeah, but why? And continually asking questions and diving down one rabbit hole after the next. And so while conscious awareness and exploration of the self and of reasons and motivations why you do or don't do something is very necessary, it's important with that conscious awareness to appreciate that it's got to be progressive, and that independently we are each responsible for our free will choices. So while you may be making a personal inquiry into some level of self-discovery, it's important to recognize that there are always going to be many, many offshoots that seem like sparkly objects. You may have the magpie syndrome where you're like, oh, this, oh, that. And you know, we can get drawn off, but that's also a form of self-sabotage. And self-sabotage is the antithesis of self-love. And so when we get into overthinking mode, it's important just to sit with yourself and put the handbrake on and say, okay, am I overthinking? How long have I been at this, nattering at this thought process? What am I avoiding? And get truthful with yourself. What am I avoiding? What's on the other side of self-thinking, overthinking? What will happen if I stop overthinking? And face yourself in your mirror of your soul, of your heart. And nothing terrible is going to happen. The worst that can happen is that you take a giant step towards self-loving. How is that bad?
Beautiful. And those self-defeating programs, those that have stopped many people going forward onto their greatness in a sense.
Yeah, because we are trained for failure. We are aimed for failure because failure is acceptable. And most people are afraid of how they will succeed rather than how they will fail, because success separates you above and beyond what is known, the common everyday connection with people. We see people who become successful, become isolated, targeted, whatever. Subconsciously, we don't want to go there. We want to stay comfortable and safe. And Overthinking is a way of staying safe because you haven't got to go into that self-inquiry of self-love. But when you do, you'll find so many more people who are there waiting to greet you that it is worth it. And let them see you in all your glory, all your shineability.
Outstanding, outstanding. So your book you're writing at the moment, do you want to tell us listeners a little bit about the book, what's going on?
Yeah, it came about quite unexpectedly, as things do in lockdown. And I relaunched my Facebook group, as I said, back in December, to now be called the Soul Whisperers Sisterhood. And I hang out there every morning at 8 o'clock. We have fun. We look at spiritual growth. We look at personal insights and inspiration. But I created a manifesto, which I have somewhere here, which is all screwed up right now, but created a manifesto, which is basically all our values, or at least 20 of our values, which coheres us as a group. And in delivering each one throughout January, I suddenly had the inspiration to turn it into a book. So it is now being turned into a book. Anybody can have the book. You don't have to do anything other than want to grow and be connected to gorgeous, spiritually minded people, women in particular. So I'm doing the final edit on that today, and hopefully it'll be out by the middle of March. So, and I'll put that on my Facebook group, and it'll be on my website as well.
Lovely. And what have you got coming up? So the weekend you've got an event coming up, which I've posted on the Facebook group as well.
Yes, I do. I'm so looking forward to it. And this is why today is so timely. So tomorrow from 10 until 12, I'm hosting a Zoom online workshop called Letting Love In. It's all about what we've been talking about today. And it's not just about the theory and the concepts, although we will go deeper with those and the whys and the wherefores. It's the how-tos. How to stop your overthinking, self-sabotage, embrace the wholeness of who's waiting for you inside. And I think you've got the link for that, Dale. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, the more the merrier. I'm sending out an email this afternoon to send over the Zoom link. So for people who act fast, I will be delighted to welcome you into our beautiful collection of gorgeous women tomorrow.
Beautiful. And have you got anything else coming up for you? There's the weekend. Is there any other events coming up?
I am going to be over in my I'll be announcing it next week. I'm going to be running my Introduction to Soul Whispering Quest starting at the end of February. And that is a 7-day, people will call it a challenge, but it's not a challenge. It's a journey of bliss. So I've got my 7-day quest starting on I think it's the 27th of February. So that's the full moon. So it's all about closing out the old and starting to bring in the new. And then later on in March, I'll be launching the next opportunity to join my 9-month program called The Way of Your Soul. And I time that in with the equinox. So that starts on March the 20th. And that's a 9-month authentic awakening journey where we connect very closely. And it's just my joy to deliver.
Beautiful. And thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you. You're inspiring to talk to, and I really appreciate our conversations.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you everyone for watching the show, and thank you for subscribing as well and commenting any feedback or anything. I really appreciate that. And we are on the 29th show as well. So things are going nice and smoothly, and I really appreciate again everyone's support. I am very happy, and it's an absolute honor to have Anna Louise Haigh on the show as well. One of the first people I ever saw on a leaflet when I was going through my awakening was Anna Louise Haigh in Harrogate. I was like, oh, she's talking about self-love here. I was like, that's something I should do in the future. So here we are today. So thank you so much for coming on. My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you soon. Thank you. You take care. See you soon, everyone. Bye-bye. God bless. Just the computer, so it's recording. So